Mother's Day to everybody. Expectant mothers, mothers by proxy, mothers to be, mothers in spirit, everybody mothers. So please, happy Mother's Day. And to the ultimate mother, Mother Nature, let's please give thanks to her for everything she's done. So, hey, people, welcome to Ancestrally Speaking. I am going to basically jump in, Jessica, right now. I'm so excited. And she's coming in. So I'm Simone Bresi-Ando, founder of Tools for Living, and we're having Jessica. Hey, lovely. You're actually, you're sideways.
I'm upside down.
It's so crazy because I did it as well, but everyone's like, you're sideways. How are you, my lovely?
I'm fine, thanks. I'm just trying to find a way to prop this
up. I know,
up.
right? Tell me about it. I literally ran. My hair's still wet, everything. And I was just like, no, it's like it was 10:30. And then I was like, yeah, I'm good. Then it was like 10:49. I was like, I haven't even put my makeup on. So it's been mad. It's so good to see your face. How are you?
I'm okay. You know how it goes. It's to be honest with you, I think most people on this side of the Atlantic are really just mourning the passing of Ty.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's been really, really heavy. I feel like everybody's just still carrying that. You know, he was, well, it's never anybody's time to die, really. But he was such a beautiful spirit. So I think we're all just really feeling like carrying it. And, you know, cycle of life, but also this pandemic, which was obviously part of the issue there. So very stressful.
So just to give people some background, so obviously I'm the founder of Tools for Living, and done many things. One of my previous because it's still running, but one of my previous brands was I'm Possible, of which we honored Jessica Horn, who is this amazing kick-ass African feminist, and it was all about empowering women and girls of color. So of course we honored Jessica. She was on our panel, but I just love Jessica's mind. She's also very ancestrally anchored, and so this was the perfect place for her to be. And as she mentioned, and I've also posted about it, Ty was a British Nigerian rapper. He really was Black British culture, to be frank. If you don't talk about Black British culture or music without referencing Ty, he was that important. And unfortunately on Wednesday he passed away due to complications with COVID-19, and the loss is tremendous, and we're all feeling it. And it also helped to inspire this conversation, because this conversation is going to be centered around giving the flowers to people while they're here, and how important that is. And so we're probably going to go off onto all many tangents, but I'm going to hand over to Jessica to introduce herself beautifully. So tell us who you are, Jessica.
That's such an interesting question, because I guess the self has many dimensions.
And tell me about it. Yeah,
I've always been bad at personal branding. So I don't think about myself in such an externalized manner. So I mean, my name is Jessica. Today I'm absolutely the daughter of Caroline Kanyanyuzi. It's Mother's Day in many parts of the world, including across Africa.
Yes.
And I am a feminist activist, and very committed to it, because I really believe in that struggle. And regardless of what I do, that politics is something that guides me. I'm also a poet. But I've spent, about the past 2 decades working in different structures and in and out of different movements, organizations, and in the context of philanthropy, actually, for social justice and transformation with a feminist eye. So
so you're
me,
just a badass. You're just a badass, really, like ultimate, like, you know, it's like, don't talk to me, I write poetry, don't talk to me, I empower women all over the world, just don't talk to me, I'm just a badass, basically. But we like badasses, we really do. And so, as I was mentioning before, you know, COVID-19 and the onset of this pandemic has really made us really in very real time and in the very heart, in our very homes and homes of our spirituality, homes that we have with family, has made us deal and face up to loss of income, loss of friendships and relationships, and loss of people, their life. And so I really wanted to start, you know, and people may think, people may think that loss is morbid. And actually, if you are sort of a believer or a practitioner of African spirituality, you would know that the spirit never dies, the spirit is eternal, and that we just move from plane to plane, right? And so as I mentioned earlier, Ty Chijoki, he was a British Nigerian rapper. He was the mayor of Brixton. I mean, mean, we don't mention Black British culture or music without mentioning Ty. And he died from complications on Wednesday from COVID-19. And so I want to talk about what, you know what, it's going to be quite a pointed question, actually, Jessica. What are you most scared or fearful of losing? And why do you think that is? Because I like to delve around the feelings we have around loss, you know, and what that's sort of anchored to. Because sometimes it's not actually the thing, it's more the feelings and the other things that it sets off. So just what are you most fearful of, I guess, right now when it comes to loss?
I mean, I think my most primal fear is losing my mother.
Mm,
And I think it's because that is my connection to the world.
Of course.
And yeah, and more broadly to losing anybody that I love.
Of course.
I think I feel that most strongly. In terms of things, I'm a collector of objects. I have so many things, and it's not because I'm materialistic, but I realized it was a way of trying to ground myself to the world as I traveled and traveled and traveled. I've traveled a tremendous amount of my life. But I realize now that, and in the course of it, I've hardly lost anything, interestingly enough.
Amazing.
I've actually I've hardly lost anything. I'm an official hoarder.com. But now I realize that in a way, material things are not so important unless they're a material thing that feels like it holds a legacy to something that was deeper. But just a general material thing, object to me isn't so strong. But people, I really do fear losing people. And I realize now that, you know, I mean, life has always been vulnerable, but different things make you feel it even more. And I feel like one of the things that the environment of this pandemic has made people feel, I think, is the sort of immediacy of the potential of loss of life.
Right.
And so that's why a lot of people are getting very anxious. I'm not so bad, but I still do fear losing people I love.
Definitely. And I started there because I wanted to kind of pivot onto, so how do you manage those fears? How do you manage those feelings? Is there anything in your spiritual practice that helps you kind of navigate your way through loss? Are you a person who likes to create lots of memories or things like that? Like, what do you do in your practice?
It's interesting. I mean, I feel like at the moment, my spiritual practice, formal spiritual practice is quite muted because I'm a new mum. I have very little time, and I've spent so little time nurturing the spiritual dimension of my being explicitly, although of course the process of pregnancy and motherhood is a deeply spiritual process, and so it's not that I have disconnected, it's just that I'm not performing rituals, etc.
In the way that you used to.
In a way that I used to. But you know what? One of the ways I do it is to write. I have an obsession with documenting the people that give, the people that give to us and create community. I think it's really vital. We have become obsessed with celebrity, and I think that social media culture has kind of re-emphasized that commercial celebrity, and then this competitive top 10 this and top 10 that. And what I realize gets lost in it is the tremendous contribution of community-based activists, the tremendous contribution of people who are quiet but diligent in giving love and spreading seeds and, you know, sowing ideas and creating warmth in our midst. And I've spent a lot of time with those people. And so one of the things I do is that whenever I write, even if it's an article for a news space or whatever, I make sure I name drop. I mention these people, I mention the initiatives, I mention the campaign. I go and see if I can get literally a quote from somebody, you know, send them a quick message and be like, what's your thoughts on this? So that I can add them into it as a way of honoring, as a way of giving thanks almost to a legacy. So for me, there's a dimension to that is spiritual in the sense that I feel like it is about honoring the spirit in us and about honoring that spirit of generosity, which is what ultimately frames activism. You know, you can't be selfish and be an activist. It doesn't work. You know, you can't just be in it for yourself and actually contribute to change, because there's always got to be a dimension that's just not about you, and a dimension of sacrifice and giving something in order for other people to be free. That's what activism is. So for me, I think there's a deeper spiritual process.
And I think it's so great you mentioned that, because I think it's that process of being okay with giving and not getting anything back, or not getting the reward back or the recognition back. It's something I've struggled with. It's something that I think a lot of people struggle with. And they're also creatives, right? You put your heart and soul into something, and you're not necessarily doing this for the applause, but you also don't want it to be ignored either. You've just kind of poured yourself. So
Yeah,
how,
so
you know,
that's
that,
no, sorry for interrupting you. No,
no, no.
that's a very important point, and I think then that speaks to the culture. So we do give, and people do give, but everybody appreciates a thank you. Everybody appreciates a thank you.
I love this. Yeah,
And
you're right.
so what we need to do is to create cultures that are more circular in terms of how we praise. So we just need to have regular practices of
Yeah,
saying, you know, shouting out people, of
yeah.
saying, sis, wow, thank you for that little, you just, or even, you know, I hear you saying something, or I see you do something and say, sis, this is how you made me feel, thank you, you know?
Oh,
So
wow.
there's just
Yeah.
something about making that more part of our culture to just celebrate people as we go, you know, because you can start feeling despondent when you just feel like I've tried all this, I've built all this, whatever, nobody seems to notice, you know, that feeling is real. And I don't think it's narcissism. I
No.
don't think it's narcissism. I do think it's especially when people genuinely give from the heart. And I mean, I think that's interestingly one of the things that we feel about the loss of our brother is that a lot of people keep saying we feel like he didn't get his due. And so the question is, well, we also let that happen though. So
Yeah,
let's
right.
not let that happen, right? So it's also that thing of, you know, we, depending on where you are, people might be in positions where they can, you know, give props in a slightly more public way, or a way that's more audible to more people. Do it, you know. But I feel like we just need to create a culture that's just constantly supporting and celebrating and understanding that the idea is we all win. When one person wins, we all win, and get away from this, like, there can only ever be one person at the top thing, which
Yeah.
narrows out the praise. It
Yeah.
narrows out the praise, you
Yeah.
know?
No,
Um,
definitely. I love
yeah.
that, you know, that, you know, let's talk about Ty. Let's talk about lots of people posting now to say, you know, it's so ironic that he's getting so much kind of love now and attention, which is what he needed while he was alive. And I think that it's really, that's a really complex statement, right? Because it's not black and white. Because the fact is that art and our creativity has to live within these frameworks, right? Of white supremacy and capitalism, all which doesn't leave black creators at the top. Okay. And so then we're trying to navigate our way. We're trying to eat. Very, you know, that's the first thing. And then we're trying to get all this kind of recognition so we can make a movement, we can make this change happen. And sometimes that doesn't happen, even though we are the best. And it's something that I wrestle with in a lot of different parts of my life. There's lots of things where I've turned up and I'm overqualified, but it isn't me that gets chosen or gets thanked or gets recognized. And the older I'm getting, the more I'm finding my anchor within myself and my ancestors, and just actually, it's only their approval that I'm really kind of focused on. But it's taken a while to get there. You know what I mean? And I don't know what we can give to others to help them move into spaces that we're living in these frameworks, which they don't even factor us in. It's not even that they see us. They don't factor us in. And we can see that about COVID-19. You know, black people are dying at higher rates because they do not factor us into the healthcare system, to the social welfare system, housing. We've not been factored in. And so these impacts are happening to us at multiple levels. So how can we kind of keep ourselves whole without letting the system destroy us, I guess?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. Something you said speaks to the idea of the question of whose work are you doing,
Oh,
right? So whose work,
sorry, that's a
whose,
quote. That's a
yeah,
quote, Jess. That's amazing.
whose
Whose
work
work
are
are
you
you doing?
doing? Whose work are you
Yes.
doing? And so
I love that.
where are you going then for your praise? So you said, well, for
Right.
you, if I'm part of this lineage of people, then I know that I'm part then of this lineage of work.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing this thing because I inherited it, or it was brought to me, or it's something that I feel I need to do as a way of
Yeah.
honoring my presence in the world, right?
Right.
In a way, if you do that, then the thanks is already inbuilt because you're kind of responding to, you
Right.
know, the question of, you know, an offer, will you
Yeah.
do this? And you say
Yeah.
yes, and you do it. So in a way, there's that.
Yeah.
I think that any group of people who have been marginalized, or who have are oppressed by structural inequality, build resistance culture. And one aspect of resistance culture has always been forms of mutual celebration and forms of mutual support to carry on, right? So that's why, for example, in feminist communities, there's such a focus, there's always been a focus on questions of healing. Or the idea that you come to the space, and as part of it, of our understanding, we understand that just by existing in the world as woman, and then with all the other aspects of your womanhood, be it black, be it queer, be it, you know, health issues, HIV positive, disability, whatever it is, that you would carry wounds, unfortunately, because as you say, we live in contexts of structural oppression. And so if we're gonna, part of the freedom, part of the process of freedom is to also heal some of those impacts of the structural oppression. And so you create that. And I feel like that's our work to do. That is also the activism. And it's really important to understand it in that way, not in a manner that's about products and processes and, you know, beauty spas and such. Because actually for most of the people we're talking about, that's not even affordable.
Right.
Yeah.
Affordable, even that good for you if you're not using
present,
good products, and you know what I mean, like you're actually just pumping toxins straight into
your
system,
body,
so,
right? And following whoever that you don't even know if what they're saying is true. So so really it's actually just more about creating environments where we then get the tools that are accessible and simple but affirming, you know, and that allow us to all feel better. You know, even just our hearts need to heal sometimes. You know, people come through a lot and experience a lot. Sometimes when you start being brave and speaking up, people don't like it. People don't want you to see you spreading your wings, and you also need that.
People don't like truth.
No, and even in a professional environment, for example, because I know a lot of women, right? You face that, you come up, you're smart, you're intelligent, you get to a certain point, and then people are like, wait a minute, you're not the right demographic for this success. So you know what? That's not going to happen.
You're not the right demographic for this success.
Right?
That's a gem. Yeah.
That also hurts. So again, how do we create environments that allow us to heal from that and keep building towards what we need? Because again, whose work are you doing? Whose work are you doing?
Whose work are you doing?
Yeah. And you're not necessarily doing the work of the person that pays you. You're there to do something else, right?
Yeah.
And so you just have to remember that and then keep focused on that and make those contributions.
No, you're right. It's so affirming to hear what you said, because I think people understand this and may have even had a fleeting thought about this, but I'm not sure if they had the language to kind of articulate what that looks like and what that can look like. And so I've been talking a lot recently about how I can create softer spaces in my life. My life is quite work orientated. I want more love. I want more love that recognizes me. I want to love me in a way that recognizes me a little bit more wholly than some of the things I've been focusing on. And so there's been a number of things that I've been doing to kind of bring that love into my life, and it not to be about all the other things that I've done consistently for years, you know? And so, I guess just linking it back to Ty and his career, and also we could maybe look at Nipsey Hussle. It's maybe a parallel we can draw for people who are not familiar with Ty. The fact that in death, they've become so popular and admired when they were there doing the work for us all to enjoy and admire while they were alive. And how we have to kind of reprogram ourselves to not wait on tragedy to make us see things, and not wait on the lesson. You know, I don't know what you think about that. Or do you think that we have to wait for the lessons? Do we have to wait for those lessons?
I think it's easier to love people who represent something that is challenging after the fact, because it's just easier to engage it.
Yeah.
So, you know, like Malcolm X is another example. There are a lot of people who are like liberation fighters or people at the time. To associate yourself with them meant to also risk in some way.
Yeah.
Once they're gone, I mean, a character like Malcolm X, with all he represented, and the way he went down, as we now know, you know, a little more about all of that, very complex. Inside, outside.
Yeah.
The guy ended up on a postage stamp.
I know, right?
A US government postage stamp.
Isn't this the irony?
You know, so I mean, but it's easier after they're gone.
as
Yeah.
much as we think it's ironic, isn't it just the cynicism of capitalism, that where they see an opportunity, where they see people drawn to a figure, that they'll capitalize it,
Yeah.
you know? And I don't know, maybe I'm being too cynical, but I don't know what your views are on that.
It's interesting. I mean, that was, I guess, was like it was a government effort, but certainly, yeah, all the T-shirts and the kind of memorabilia, as it were,
Yeah.
that doesn't go to benefit,
Right.
any of the community
Right.
initiatives he would have supported, or the Pan-Africanism he was
True.
developing, or anything. It's
True.
just for somebody's wallet. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So you see, that's the thing. So solidarity. So Che Guevara has this saying: solidarity means running the same risks. That means that,
Ooh, allies,
yes,
are you hearing us? Allies, are you hearing us?
running the same risks.
Ooh,
So that means
running the
that at the
same
time
risks.
that somebody
Ooh.
is standing up and challenging a system of power,
You
and
know, I'm
it's
jotting all of these down.
dangerous,
I'm jotting all these because these are just everything. Yeah, go on.
and it's dangerous, you have to be there with them in that moment. That's
Yeah,
the solidarity. It's not
yeah.
after it's all over and it's safe to just come up and be like, hey, I'm down there. You know that thing you said? Yeah, that was
Right,
cool, when
right,
nobody's looking.
right,
So I feel
right.
like even with these artists and the people, like oftentimes they didn't. I mean, Ty rapped a lot about, he didn't
Yeah.
necessarily want mainstream praise. It wasn't, or kind
Mm,
of to be part of the system. It wasn't that celebration really that he
no,
was seeking at all.
I think
But
it's community, wasn't it? It
it
was his
could,
own community.
yeah, and which he built. And I think sometimes that's the thing too, that if you're the
Say that
person
again. He built it. Hmm.
doing the building, sometimes you also don't see what you're building because you're so busy in the dirt, and you don't really see, and
Ooh,
you don't
yeah.
get
Say
the
that again.
you don't get the bird's eye view. But
Yeah,
people need to stand alongside that, and I think
yeah,
that's what rarely gets done. So I think,
yeah.
activism requires a tremendous amount of humility, because you can't expect so much in terms of, I want this, I want that, I should have this, I should have that. It's a
Hmm.
little different, but I feel
Hmm.
like that solidarity is critical. So you really have to be there
Hmm.
with people and be willing to say,
Hmm.
you're going to vilify that person, or you're going to try and treat this person badly, or you're going to, be racist in this meeting. And I'm
Hmm.
actually going to, in whatever way I can, I'm going to then and there say, or in another way, speak up about it and be like,
Hmm.
you're trying to take her down, you have to
Hmm.
talk to me first.
Hmm.
That's activism, is challenging
Yeah,
power,
yeah.
so
Hmm.
that to me is a process anyway.
Yeah, I
So
like that. I mean, I'm just thinking as a creative, as someone who's created all these different brands and organizations and communities, right? So, as you said, Ty built his community. He really did, for his generation, most definitely,
mhm,
off the backs of who came before. And I
mhm,
often look at who's building it beyond us, right?
mhm,
And sometimes I'm not sure if it's being built at all, to
mhm,
be frank. I
mhm,
think there's people who give us some nods, but it's not sustainable because it's so ingratiated into the system. And for these things to be sustainable, they have to survive outside of the system. And that's what we're seeing with the pandemic. People who are surviving and thriving are those who've always navigated the system instead of just been in it. People who are using things and tools and practices that are not all about the things now that have collapsed, that we can't get access to.
mhm,
Everybody always says, have multiple income streams, have multiple income streams. That's true. And I think that's also part of how we have to also find love in our life. We have to have multiple love income, right? And also give it out as well, in a way that we're in a place that when we give, it really has to be about us giving rather than the reception. And that's hard because sometimes it's very hard to delineate those things, especially in a relationship. You don't want to be in a relationship with someone and you're just
mhm,
giving, 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 and never being
mhm,
served and never being, it's not
mhm,
reciprocal. That doesn't make any
mhm,
sense.
mhm,
But there's something that we ask of creatives
mhm,
that I don't know if it's fair. We
mhm,
kind of ask them to do all the creative stuff, put it out in the world, and don't grumble if someone else gets bigger off of it, copies you, does a poor mimic but gets bigger.
mhm,
Don't grumble, oh,
mhm,
that don't look good,
mhm,
that don't look good. Why do
mhm,
we ask this of creatives? Why?
mhm, mhm. It's interesting. I mean, I guess it's
Mm,
about, it's particular to a certain understanding of where creatives sit in Western culture, and
that's true.
so
Yeah.
and it's about hierarchy of value. I've been thinking a lot about it because I think a lot about the celebritization of activism. That's one of my to be honest, my pet peeves, but my concerns.
It's annoying.
But it's because it's about hierarchies of values. So who do we consider to be more important? So for me, I've written a lot about this influencer culture. A lot of people are not so happy with what I say about it. But the point I'm trying to make is this, that if you're doing the work, it's all good, baby. But if all you're doing is talking about it and you are not willing to put your neck out, to pull other people up, to give time that's not in the limelight to this thing, then is this activism? And what happens to all those people who are out there doing the work and not on the followers trail and not whatever? They literally get no mention now. Like the hierarchy of value has just shrunk down. Right. And so with artists, it's similarly, it's like either you're a celebrity or you're just a creative that does dope stuff, but like doesn't really get props. And I think we need to change this hierarchy of value and to understand it. I think the other thing is that there's this idea that creativity is somehow just like a kind of gift that falls from the sky into somebody's hand, and then out into the world. And while that is actually, interestingly, part of the process of creativity, I think any creative that you speak to will talk about that. Their role as channel. Sorry.
Are you still there? Oh, you still there?
Yeah.
I got you back.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah. Sorry. It was my power.
It's like a birthday.
Sorry.
Oh, so your power? Okay, no worries.
Yeah. So I mean, it's that thing about creatives, you know, you are a channel, but most creatives have spent decades perfecting their craft, to spend lots of money going to university or studying somewhere or whatever to get the skill. And so it's also this idea that it's
that
not
break
the
down
what have you.
and the pain.
So it's this, so it's this idea that somehow it's actually not a profession. So I think when it comes to, you know, and then also like in some cultures, creators are considered to be quite important in the social structure. And I feel like in Western society, there is this idea that your artist is not a necessarily very useful member of society. And interestingly, unfortunately, through colonization, you see it a lot in African context too. So you know how everybody's always saying, oh, you know, in fact, Salif Keita, I remember hearing this interview with Salif Keita where he said his mum on her deathbed, and this is after he'd won, like, I mean, global awards and everything.
Right.
On her deathbed, turned and said to him, I still wish you'd become a doctor.
Oh, African parents, eh? I swear, the way they hold on to being a doctor or a lawyer, you're like, there are other things to do.
But interestingly, and he's a Keita, which means that lineage-wise, he actually comes from a lineage of griots. So it's also very interesting. Yes. So
that's his lineage. You can't go against that.
So, but this is the funny thing. So colonization has also done that, and there's also so in African society now, creatives now don't have as important a role.
You're right.
And it's devastating. So I think you find that in a lot of environments where, you know, people just are kind of acting against. They feel like they have to act against society, their parents' wishes, etc. And it does create a whole other range of dynamics that I think means creators are more isolated in our societies and get you know, less praise than they should.
I think also it's the I don't know, it's so we're in a place where we're sheltering in place, and now we're really seeing again, or some people, I've always known how important it is, just how much we need the arts. Look at what has been keeping us sane and alive and the soundtrack to our sanity right now. And then also let's think about, you may know the producer, Andre Harrell, who created Uptown Records. I was gutted. He created my youth soundtrack. If we don't have these minds and these people who really have the passion, if we don't support them, then we don't have memories. The memories we have, what I would believe, if I didn't have Jodeci when I was a 15-year-old girl, how would I know what's fine and what's not fine? And yes, that's the most, you know, kind of surface level kind of thing, but those people gave me joy. And I just believe that all Black people, all people who are non-white, people of color, we have to grab joy wherever the hell we find it in this world and in the short time we're here on this plane. And if I'm going to find it in Uptown Records, if I'm going to find it in Ty and what he says in Rain and what he says in Music to Fly To, if I'm going to find it, then we have to support them. And we have to also support ourselves to not feel like, oh, I'll get to it. you know, not take on these priorities of other people that don't serve us and also don't sustain us, right? Because we've seen how quickly these systems we're in can shrink. They can shrink. Look how quickly they went. Some businesses went up, big, huge multinational businesses went up within 3 weeks. 3 weeks it took for those big businesses. And so it makes me wonder that this is just like, what do they call them? Like a shelf shop, like white label, you know what I mean? It's like it's an empty shop. It's just got a shop face, but when you go in, it's just all product that's either no name or broken. And I just think we need to be a little bit more careful in how we're consuming everything personally, but particularly our creative arts and what we're doing to the people in the way that we consume, right? So we understand that when we eat less meat, that's less impact on the environment. But do we understand that when we buy from certain companies, certain more conglomerates, that they don't actually nurture the communities? And we say it, but what do we do about it? I mean, yeah.
No, it's interesting you keep going back to economic systems. I mean, I completely agree. And of course, what COVID-19 has done is made us not go shopping. And that's actually what's led to a lot of the economic vulnerability, because people aren't out. So it means that you don't have the workers in the shops, and you don't have the products moving through as easily, apart from the basics like food and medicine. But otherwise, we're actually not really shopping and you know, and flying and doing leisure things and what have you, that are all have taken a massive toll on the environment and what have you. But it's interesting. I mean, for me, I feel like we all live in nation states, and like it or not, here we are, and all of us who earn through a formal economy pay tax. And so if that's going to be the case, then I firmly believe that my tax money needs to be put to proper use. And I think that one of those uses is actually grants for creatives. I mean, to me, the amount of money that governments spend on, African context, the amount of money they spend on their vehicles, you know, you know, the amount of money that's spent on military expenditure and what have you, that is trillions and trillions and trillions. What about creating proper artist funds? I know in France, I don't know if they have it, but I knew some Black creators in France, and they at the time were benefiting from an artist grant that basically, if you can prove that you're gigging a certain numbers of times a year, then they actually give you like a grant to help you live. You know, which is just part of saying that artists belong in our society. We understand that most artists don't have a huge income. And so we're going to create a revenue stream that allows them to cover their basics so that they can do their thing, because art is actually important to us. So I feel like those are some of the structural ways of showing that how important creativity is to us. In this COVID-19 period, I've seen in a lot of arts communities, people putting up funding, like crowdfunding requests, and some of them have done really well. I know there's one in the Seattle area that did really, really well, just acknowledging that, again, a lot of performing artists in particular get money through gigs, and since nobody's doing gigs right now, people need to eat, and so there's been that tremendous amount of, you know, of interaction and support. And so, you know, I think all of these things are structural ways of rectifying, but we have to begin with how we think about it first. And I think we need to kind of revalue and recenter and re-acknowledge, you know, not just in word, but in deed.
I think that's what this moment's about. And I think if we come out of this unchanged, then that would be a very detrimental thing to our beings, because if we don't learn this lesson now, it's coming again, and it's going to come harder. And I don't think we'll be able to recover. And I mean spiritually and physically, all of the ways that we can be affected, the hit is coming, you know. And I don't want to suffer. Who wants to suffer? You know, I'm a human being. Okay, yes, I communicate with the ancestors and spirits and things like that. I have that gift, but I'm still of a human experience. So I want this experience to be without, you know, destruction and oppression and stuff like that. So if we can do things to kind of stop that, then we're going to have to do this. This is the time. I talk about timing because for me, there's two types of time, right? There's linear time, which isn't really our concept. But I do believe, like Black people, you know, just people of color, our times are circular. We're more a circular thing. Just as the world revolves, we revolve. I think that's why, you know, I know people talk about Black people's time, but I would say, you know, well, that's a whole linear type of thing. And the kind of things we're dealing with, this linear way of seeing our lives and seeing our progression and seeing our aging and seeing the things that we're valued in, that's not, it doesn't work, does it? Because we've seen that people who make, and if we want to take one of the successes in this society, people who make money make it later on in life, 40, 50, 60. But all the people that get the celebration, 20, 25, I mean, I don't even think over 25 now, they even want to put them on TV, you know? It's those kind of things. And I don't know how we can be far more circular when we're told to be lines. I don't know what
so
you think about
the time that we're operating on is industrial time, and so it's so clocking in, clocking out. But even that notion of, okay, we've got something from 2 to 3 and you need to be there from 2 to 3 is industrial time. And yes, there are so many other types of time. I mean, because of COVID, obviously I can't really leave my house much, so I started gardening.
Nice.
And you realize, so for agriculture there's also its own time, because
True. Yes.
it takes forever. Like there's really there's no instant gratitude.
You can't rush Mother Nature. No,
you can't rush it. I mean, you plant something and you can't be like, grow, you know, and tomorrow it's going to have flowers. It just doesn't work that way. And so I think people who work with the earth see the time differently, because you also understand that things work in cycles, things work in seasons, and you need patience. Like there's a deep kind of patience that you need. You were talking at the beginning about the notion of, okay, having the people don't die, they just exist in spirit and move from plane to plane. So there's that idea that actually we're all coexistent at the same time. So even somebody who was maybe alive in flesh 100 years ago could still come to you now.
Right.
That means that they're still here. So the time is kind of flat and just it's more deep.
Yes,
right?
I get
so
you. Yeah.
Line,
which layer are you on?
Yeah, the time works like that instead. So I think maybe what's more difficult is just that we're then trying to exist in multiple realities now, right? We're trying to exist in multiple forms of time. And that's what's difficult. And I'm also noticing there's some dope comments here, but I will get to them in a sec. I just saw a dope comment. But we're existing in multiple times, and that can be hard. Somebody was talking about what we were speaking of before, about how, you know, there's some companies that, yes, sure, they've cleaned up their supply chain and everything, but the way they treat their employees is still something that's not acceptable, and that's something you wouldn't vibe with. So that's the thing. It's just about consciousness. It's only now that we know a lot about companies. Before, we didn't know a lot. And scandals like the scandal with Nike and the factories and all of the kind of movement around labor rights help to really now create this environment where people are being forced to be transparent about what they're doing. Past decade, we've seen more about environmental impact, for example, and we understand more what companies are doing and their impact on the environment. Fashion, who knew how much of a pollutant fashion was? So we're starting to see that more and more and more. And having kind of, you know, questions of labor rights on the table. And I think it's just difficult because we're all quite dependent on all of this. I think that to me is, everybody has been inviting us to see this as a point of rupture and therefore of possibility. And I think that you can only see possibility in it if you don't feel like you need something from the world as is, like the old world, the pre-COVID world. Because if you do, you're still hanging on for dear life, trying to work out, you know, like, how do I recover? How do I, and so that's the trick. That's the difficult thing here. So I see it, for example, like, now, you know, there's people are seeing animals that used to know, you know, haven't been seen forever now, like wandering around free because they've reclaimed.
I know. We had some killer bees, I think, or a killer wasp that's resurfaced in Washington or something. And I was like, on top of this, thank you. It was huge. The thing was like that, and I was just like, that's going to kill me. That's a bird. It's not an insect.
Well, you know, I mean, it just shows that maybe we're not the ones in power. But
basically, well, I certainly wouldn't be. If I saw that coming to me, I will be submissive. I will not be trying to stand up to that thing. Oh my God, that was
But
scary.
but it's hard. So it's hard.
Yeah.
It's like, this whole thing of like, I think that we can't, we should open our imaginations to the possibility of creating something new, and at the same
Yeah.
time be bit patient with ourselves and understanding that at the
Yes.
same time, most of what we know is what's already here.
Right.
Most of
Right.
what we know is what's here.
Yeah.
Most. Some people have really investigated and are living in another way, or have tried to, or are looking at, but most of what we know day to day is what's here. And
Right.
so we have to be super creative with the imagination, but then also trying to start practicing it slowly, because you only really learn by doing. And what is it going to be? We're gonna have to make it with our hands. It's not going to be something we can just say, oh, I see a new economy, it's going to look like this, and a new approach
Right.
to the environment will look
Right.
like this. No, we have to try and practice it and see
Yeah.
what comes of
Yeah.
it. I saw this beautiful article about a urban gardener in California, and of course, now that there's all this crisis in the food chain, he's like,
Yeah.
well, I've got this entire organic orchard in my backyard. All the kids are coming and eating, and
Yeah.
that's another way, that's another vibe. You don't really have to go to the shop, apart from maybe seeds
Right.
and things.
Yeah.
We
Well,
can
this
create other economies,
other
other systems,
economies.
but you have to
Yeah.
do it. You have to use
Yes.
your hands. You can't
Right.
just chat.
Go and
You
get
have
it nicely
yeah,
packaged up and
you
stuff.
have to do it. You have to
Right.
start experimenting now.
Because they're having a food like a meat crisis here, because many of the plants they have lots of workers who have COVID, and so now they were interviewing them on the news, and the farmers were just like, well, we're just going to have to go to farmers markets and just cut out the middleman. And it's kind of like, you could have done that before, but we want mass, right? We want less stuff and bigger profits. And yet, when you do that, look at what happens. Your business just kind of failed, because that's the one pipeline you had. And so it's important, and yes, I have been speaking quite economically, because I think sometimes that's the biggest way you can get people to listen. And that's the biggest and most realist way that people can see how this really does affect them, and how they need to build something better. And I really love the point you said, we have to build the new, right? So people talk about this new normal, but it won't become normal unless it's built. And not only that, maybe we don't need normal. Maybe we need new and rugged and flexible and open, so many different people can have a stake in this new. Because I don't want a refined pre-COVID. I got no time for that. I never liked what was there before anyway. I'm looking for new, which gives me access, right? And also access to dip out when I want to too. So I don't know, it's interesting to me. I do want to take some questions from our lovely viewers, so please type away, people, and ask us anything you want to. But I also wanted to say our Adinkra, we're doing a Adinkra symbol for the month, right? And obviously May just started, and our Adinkra symbol for this month, I'm not going to embarrass myself and do the tree pronunciation of it, so I'm going to tell you the English pronunciation of it. And it is basically, you don't wait for the rain to stop before you collect rainwater. So for me, that was really powerful for choosing the one for the month. And I'd like to hear your understanding of what that means to you, and what does the rainwater signify for you?
So the idea is to not wait till you're in crisis, I guess, before you realize that you need to act. So this, it's interesting, in this whole period. Actually, it started for me with the bushfires that were in California, then in Australia, and then COVID. I kept getting flashbacks of Octavia Butler's book, Parable of the Sower.
Right.
And I just thought, but okay, actually, there are like Black feminist sci-fi writers who've predicted all of this. We could have started working on a plan before.
A lot earlier, yeah.
We waited for the rain to fall, and now we're like, oh, there's no water.
Right.
So, so I feel like it's that, it's like there are also people who see very clearly and who just say there's a problem, and I think we need to work on trying to fix it before that problem becomes the only problem. And really, like I said, are sort of scrambling around trying to work out what to do. Because actually we don't have enough skills, or we haven't been practicing enough to know what to do. So I feel like COVID has sort of caught a lot of people on a back foot, where it hasn't though. So for example, there's a lot of, I exist between many geographic worlds. And I just happen to be in London at the moment. And so I'm seeing how people are talking about quote unquote Africa from here. And it's all this sort of like projecting that Africa is going to, you know, sort of be crippled by, you know,
Right.
coronavirus and everything. And I
Right.
say, is that so?
No, because they ain't, and they living.
So what's interesting is that, for example, on the testing kits, which we know that testing is like key to battling this thing, both in Senegal and in Ghana, for example, I'm sure probably in other places, actually the scientists got to work very fast and have
Quickly,
worked out how to make super quick, super cheap testing kits.
Yeah.
In Senegal, the scientists made one that costs $1 to produce. $1.
Yeah.
And so they're now rolling it out, and they can basically test everybody that comes to centers.
We love
you know, right. Whereas
That's
in the
African
UK,
ingenuity. You know, this is what we've always done, because we, unfortunately,
exactly.
the European interruption left us with so little. So we've had to navigate around that. We didn't just stop. You know what I mean? From us being stolen, from us, you know, from us being stolen and coming onto these shores and Americas and the Caribbean. Look at what we've created. Who
Exactly.
could
So
do
that.
that?
Exactly. So, I mean, it just feels like the rain is still falling in the African continent. People understand, you know, how to deal with crisis. They're very quick with it.
Yes.
As soon as the COVID thing hit, the amount of like quick action African
Yes,
feminists
I
across
saw
the
that.
continent,
Yes.
they were like, wait, lockdown? That means women are locked down with their abusers. We need to start emergency hotlines. This is happening, that's happening, this is that. And people just got to work very fast. It took, in other places, it's taking people a lot longer. So I feel like if it's raining, right? If the soil is fertile on the African continent and people are already in the midst of this, then let's think about what we need to do so that we're not waiting for the rain to end before we're then trying to say, oh, maybe we should collect water. So what else is there that really, I just feel like it's a game change. It could potentially be a game changing moment. So the question is what to do now. What's difficult is when you're trying to also play on other people's terms. And I think that's where we always get stuck. So if we're still trying to play on the terms of how the world is structured now, it's not really going to work. But the innovation needs to then kind of be about building new terms so that then, you know, you can kind of do your thing. And that survival capacity is very strong. But it's just about recognizing that it's there. So you also have to know the rain is falling. You have to know the rain is falling, and that the rain is falling is not a flood or is not at the wrong time of year. It is the perfect time, because what it's doing is watering your seeds, and you need to know that that's what's happening, and that actually your seeds are growing. And so you need to have a sense of what you want to do to harvest.
I love that. I love that. I didn't even think about the rainwater in terms of making things fertile. The imagery that I got from it was just buckets and buckets, and information. I don't know why I always see the rainwater as information. It's like I had to collect information, and it wasn't just it was information about survival, kind of farming. It's information about self-defense, possibly. You know, it's information about, you know, just taking care of myself in a holistic manner, in preventative mechanisms against inflammation. You know, all the things that we know of this pandemic and other diseases. It was that collect that rainwater, collect that, and then use it. You know, that's what we have, because yes, information is free. Not all the good stuff is free, but it is free, and we can get through some of it if we have a sort of discerning eye to know what works and what doesn't work and what's real stuff. But I love the idea of you saying that the rainwater is making things fertile, because there is lots of opportunity in this moment. I've taken some personal ones myself, and I'm grabbing them with both hands, and I still feel some anxiety around that, because I don't know, you know, I don't know exactly where things are going to land, but I know I have to do these things, because I've always seen in moments of very personal crisis, I've created some very beautiful things. I'm Possible, Tools for Living. Like, these are things that have nourished people in ways that, you know, I see in my inbox when they're saying, I got your cards and it's done. You know, it's just such a great feeling. But there's a part of me that also wants us, and it goes back to Ty as well, is that I really want us to feel joy in all these processes and the collecting of rain. And I don't want us to forget that. I don't want us to forget how important it is for us to have joy, because we're going to do all this collecting and preparing and planning, and it is a serious time, but it is our time and the only time we're going to have of this. So we have to figure out joy too. And I don't know, I think I want to end on a light note. It's just, how are you figuring out joy in this moment?
I mean, for me, like I said, really, it's the gardening. I just go out, I touch the soil, I, you know, clear up. I mean, weeds, amazed by weeds.
They're so resilient. They
I'm
don't
like, you
care
guys
about
are
any of you.
not
Yeah, no,
playing.
they
I'm
don't. They're
like,
just
hey,
like, oh, bit of light, a bit of
I,
soil. I'm here. They
I
don't
found the
care.
taproot of this one weed. I was like, hello. I'm like,
Yeah,
you are
yeah.
huge. What is
Yes,
this? So
right?
for
Yeah,
me, it's also just learning about resilience through that. I'm like,
right.
interestingly, a lot of weeds are medicinal.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we don't want them, but actually the dandelions and all those things,
Oh, yes.
they're
Yeah,
medicinal,
the
yeah.
medicinal, yeah.
And
Dandelion is calendula. Am I right? I think it's
no, that's
calendula.
marigolds. No,
Marigold, I'm
dandelions,
sorry.
yeah,
I'm sorry, yeah.
you
I got
can
that
eat
mixed
the
up.
leaves, and yeah, it's very good for you.
Yeah,
Nettles also, they're very high in
they're very
iron.
good.
So
Nettle
like all
tea,
of
yeah.
these, yeah, all these things are weeds. But
I know.
so, you know, learning from that, learning from the process of just, again, like I said, how the patience that it requires, and
Yeah,
settling
yeah.
in the joy that you feel when you see a little bud of something,
Right.
understanding how each different plant works, you know. So I feel
Yeah.
like it's just a humbling process. It's part of like just feeling a lot smaller in a bigger world. And that for me has been beautiful. I also appreciate the different efforts that people are doing to just like bring us together and make us just feel as a collective sense of so being a mama and the time and everything, I couldn't
Yes.
watch the Jill Scott and
Oh,
Erica
yeah.
Badu live, but
Yeah.
somebody joyfully went and, you know, made some
Yeah.
bootleg copy on YouTube. I was
Yeah.
like, thank you for the
Thank
people
you.
who
We
did that.
need this.
And so I was listening to it, and my whole, you know, it
It
brought
was a
back my
dream.
whole, yeah, my
Exactly.
whole
It was a dream.
20s,
But this is
my
what I'm
whole
saying.
thing.
These people are so important.
Important, yeah. So
So
just even that, like
important.
jamming and remembering, you know,
Yeah.
certain moments in my life.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
music has been a real healer and a real kind of like reviver at this time.
Yes. Yes.
And then just, yeah, I mean, like I tend to stay in contact with people, but I've been reconnecting in different ways with
Yeah.
people, and that's also
Yeah.
been beautiful. So I feel like, you know, the earth,
Hmm.
music, and community have
Hmm.
been the ways to stay
Yeah.
smiling, you know?
Yeah, and it's actually that's the ways of indigenous
Hmm.
communities. If you look at
Hmm.
black and brown communities throughout the world, those three
Hmm.
things, those three tenets, is what have kept us sustained for.
Hmm.
That's why with the oldest civilizations, you
Mm,
know, all European civilizations are not as old as us, and they don't
mm,
have those tenets as what
mm,
underpins
mm,
their
mm,
civilizations.
mhm,
But that's why we will prevail, and why we still
mm,
prevail, because
mhm,
they're. As much as we've had interruptions and things forced on us, those things still shine through in many different
mm,
ways.
mm,
And what I'm finding, this awakening of a lot of Black people, particularly in the diaspora and even on the continent, of waking up to their ancestral spirituality is
mm,
just such a beautiful moment. And I think the
mm,
veil is thinning. And I think people
mm,
need to grab it with both hands and let
mm,
themselves be guided by the people who care for them and their biggest army, and just let them be guided to prosperity. And when I say prosperity, I'm talking about the abundance of joy, the abundance of opportunity to connect, to love, to live, to
mm,
see, to feel. You know,
mm,
those are the things that your ancestors are going to give to you, you know, and
mm.
maybe not the time you want, because, you know, they have their times. But you'll
I'd
get
say,
it. You'll get it. This has
yeah.
been such a beautiful, beautiful way for my Sunday morning to happen. I know it's Sunday afternoon for you. I'm so, so glad you decided to do this with me. I'm really glad. I wanted to talk about everything I was feeling, but really just to pinpoint people in ways to say, you know, hey, listen, if we don't start giving flowers, then we're not going to really, this thing doesn't work, right? If we don't start
Mm.
giving this flowers. We've had a question here from Lola. Hi, Lola. Jessica, what are your thoughts on impact of C19 on the continent? How can we provide practical support? Also, thoughts on indigenous medicinal practices as a means to support themselves. So we have about 2 minutes, so go for it.
So COVID-19 on the continent, so actual infection rates are not very high
No.
anywhere, although there's, you know, some countries, particularly on like the coasts,
Yeah.
because of travel, but the infection rates are not very high. So the impact has really more been economic and social. So like everywhere, domestic violence rates have spiked. And like everywhere, people, I mean, in a lot of the African continent, people earn money every day. It's a daily
Yeah.
wage.
Yeah.
So if you can't go and trade in the day
Right.
or get money another way in the day, you have a problem. And again,
Right.
there's not the same like structural support. So,
No.
you know, income support and all of that.
Yeah.
So that's really been the biggest impact.
Right.
And I think generalized, you probably just need to find a community of people that you're connected to or concerned about and find out what they need and support in that way is what I would say. Obviously, the continent is huge. So, and things, like I said, are different depending on where people are. So that's what I would say is find a community of people you're connected to or concerned about and then see, you know, what you can do. Or if there's a particular issue, then there are organizations doing. So, for example, there are domestic violence hotlines that have set up in different countries to support. There are different kinds of initiatives like that.
Yes. Yeah.
In terms of traditional medicine, you know, I honestly just don't want to comment because I just feel like I'm not a medic. I'm not even a traditional medical practitioner.
Right.
And, you know, so I feel like on this stuff where it's a question of life and death, I don't want to start giving my opinion on stuff I really don't know.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say is that I know there's been an issue now, the Tanzanian president and what have you, and I just think it's a little problematic to also kind of push cures that you have no idea work or not with something so serious. So I think we also just need a little bit of caution there on all sides. I mean, you would say the same of Western medical, you know, intervention. Though, why are you using something you don't even know works? I think it's the same. Medicine is just medicine, you know.
Yes, you're right.
And so, that's how I feel about that.
I have one thing to add with indigenous medicines. I feel I use a lot of them and a lot of the practices, and I feel a lot of it is preventative. It works the best when you're using it as a preventative measure. And I believe if you're in a ritual with your medicines, you don't get to the point of infection and other things. This is my personal view. You don't get to the point of the infection stuff because you've been preventing. And we all know prevention is cure. Your doctors in Western medicine tell you the same thing. That's why you have to exercise. That's why you have to do all these things so these other ailments don't come. So I find indigenous medicines the best for propping up immune systems, but you know, just tackling those situations before it gets to the critical. But there has been some proven and very good ways of curing things, but this is the time to get on it if you're trying to prevent and trying to build up something rather than, you know. And so yes, again, the thing is, this is the first time it's jumped into the human system, so we don't know, you know, we don't know how it could react with anything, so we just need to be mindful of that. But it's been a pleasure. It's been such a pleasure. I'm so glad we've done this. Jessica Horn, thank you for joining Ancestrally Speaking. It's on my new weekly, well, I'm going to try and do it weekly because, gosh, I need to sleep on a Sunday. But I'm sleeping every day. But hey, let's let's figure out my sleeping pattern so I can make this a little bit more like, hey. But it's been so good. And I'm so glad you've done this with me. I'm so glad we've given each other flowers. And hopefully we've given you all flowers who've tuned in. I want to wish a very thank you to everybody who's tuned in. I want to wish everybody a very happy Mother's Day. As I said, all types of mothers to be. And I'm really, really in love with what we can create and the people with the minds and are doing the work. And keep supporting and keep saying hello and keep smiling at people. It's the small things that really count to making people's day. And your last word?
I just want to say thank you for always creating these platforms. You always make platforms for sisters to shine. I appreciate that.
Definitely.
So just sending the love back to you. You are possible.
We know thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so humbled, but it's what I do, you know. Yes. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. And
thanks
we'll
to everybody.
Soon. Take care.
All right, bye.
Bye.